Welcome back, everybody. Today I'm going to be going over E equals mc squared and how it and why it translates movement and energy through space into mass. So I'm going to start by saying that it's due to photon confinement. So that's the mechanism by which energy is converted into rest mass. So what you're doing is you're removing the spatial and temporal dimensions, so it no longer has space and time. So it's no longer moving through space, no longer moving through time, and now it's confined into just the energy component. So you're removing the space and time component, leaving you with just the energy component in a certain area of space and time. So that gives you rest mass. And obviously we're using the speed of light because guess what? Light is going at the speed of light. Photons are going at the speed of light. And that's why photon confinement is a direct translation of E equals mc squared. So you have two photons moving at the speed of light. They convert that speed of light into rest mass. So their energy, and this is why photons colliding directly leads to mass. Right now we consider it to be a result of the Higgs field, but that is just, it makes no sense. The Higgs boson, as I'll eventually explain, is just a result of turbulence or temporary photon confinement in a certain arrangement, but it's an unstable arrangement, and it dissipates and returns back to its original energy state of photons, or maybe it'll decay into other particles that are more stable. But overall, this is all the result of photons interacting and confining within particles. So E equals mc squared is correct, but it's misarticulated. Okay, so the first thing we're going to start with is distance. So we're going to work all the way up to what c squared represents. So we have the E, we have the m. It's like, okay, these things are related through c squared. So we have to define what c squared is. So you're saying this energy converts into mass through c squared. So if that's the reason, it's not some abstract baryon it's not some abstract particle called a boson, Higgs boson. It's the speed of light that is the conversion factor. So it's obvious there's nothing else that can convert it besides light, because nothing can go the speed of light. So if we assume that nothing can go the speed of light, and the speed of light is what's acting as the conversion factor from energy to mass, rest mass, then that is the mechanism, the thing responsible for energy converting to mass. So it makes no sense that we would create a whole other particle and understanding in order to understand this relationship, because that's what equations are. It shows you the relationship plain as day in front of you. Like, these things are interacting. Energy, c squared, and m are interacting to convert into each other. That's why it's an equation. This energy equals mass times this c squared. So let's walk through what c squared is. So in order to get to c squared, we have to start with distance. So that's d of space. So you can use meters, you can use any arbitrary amount of space, but you're still using the true dichotomy of space. And then you can say you're dividing that by time and the measurement of the true dichotomy of time. And then you get to velocity. So distance over time is velocity, or movement through space over time. Then we take velocity over time, and that gives us acceleration. So you can say the change in that velocity over time, so it can go faster or slower through space, is what acceleration is. Okay, so that gets us m over seconds squared. So that'd be, if we're using meters and seconds, so meters over seconds squared. So this means that we're doing a distance over time, but we're only squaring the time. And then you multiply that acceleration by distance, and you get something even more meaningful. The extra d is critical, as it compounds the acceleration across space. So let me just read real quick. Now we're no longer just talking about motion or change in motion. We're talking about the total effect of motion acting over distance. It's not acceleration, it's not velocity, and it's not distance. It's obviously all of those things, but it's a measure of time and space acting dynamically, a bridge to scalar rest energy. So it's like We're converting that motion through space and time, and we're getting rid of those. So space and time are contained within c squared. We get rid of that. All we're left with is the energy. And if you're removing space and time, that means it's not moving through space and time. It's stagnant. So you could say the particles that give rise to relativity are stagnant in space and time, whereas photons are timeless or all time simultaneously, which would resolve in a point in time, you could say, or something along those lines. But so that means that this will eventually be expanded upon by somebody else, or maybe even me. But that relationship shows you the mechanisms that give rise to relativity itself. So our ability to have a relationship with space and time is directly because what we're made of is absent space and time. So the things we're made of are no longer in space or time. So we are made of this rest energy, and we can't utilize that energy. We can only use the relative energies that manifest as results, like kinetic energy, etc. So we are made of this rest energy that has a place in relative space and time. So when you take something out of this whole that is all space, all time, all energy, and take only the relative component of space and time and isolate it to where it's no longer moving through space or time, it's absent space or time, then all you're left with is that rest energy. And then you can have obviously relative energies, which are different than rest energy or rest mass, but that's a whole nother story. So all we're articulating is how that c squared removes space and time from energy, and then you get rest mass. And it's through the mechanism of photon confinement. So two particles moving each other at the speed of light, they confine to where they're no longer moving relative to each other, because you can imagine two things moving at the speed of light entering a confined orbit with each other. I mean, they're held together by vacuum energy, is my current understanding of that. But I've already explained that in another video, but I'll eventually get to a deeper understanding of what that means and how to properly articulate it. But I've done a pretty good job in my original video. But once you understand that, then you understand, okay, E equals mc squared is just a conversion factor of that energy of the photons into a rest or stagnant thing, because it's kind of like if you take the Earth and Moon as a whole, they're rotating around each other. Obviously, the Moon is a little bit faster because it has less mass, and the Earth's bigger, but it's still rotating around. They're orbiting each other. So we need to stop thinking about the Moon orbiting the Earth. They're orbiting each other. It's just slightly different orbits. Like we're orbiting the Sun, and the Moon's orbiting us, but us and the Sun are also in our own orbit. And this is where chaos theory also comes in, because once you include that third body of the Moon, you lose the sight of the relationship between the orbits. It's like, is the Moon orbiting the Earth, or is the Earth and the Moon orbiting the Sun? Is it just the Earth orbiting the Sun? No, they're all each relational to each other. So you can't just dismiss one. You can only take one relationship into account at a time. And that leads you to only be able to focus on one relationship at a time. And this is why equations only have one equal sign. You can't have, things can be multiply equal, I guess, but you can't have the relationship between the Earth and the Moon and then have another equal sign that says the Moon and the Earth and the Sun. And then the equations are only one relationship. So now that we've explained most of the conversion factor, so we've gotten all the way to that c squared is removing space and time. So now what are we doing with that? So we're saying this d squared over t squared, which is what c squared represents. It's the distance over time squared. Then that means we're removing the distance and the time of relative motion, and we're collapsing that movement entirely, and that's what's left is rest mass. So now that we have the mathematical interpretation of it, we can talk about the mechanism. And I already did a little bit, which was photon confinement, but I can just read through this and then we can be done, because this is, I know it's a really simple equation. That's what's beautiful about it, is like the explanation should be equally as graceful and simple. And that's exactly what happens through this mechanism of photon confinement. It's just two photons have energy, they collide, they create rest energy equal to the amount of energy that they had. if let's say they make electron and a positron pair, obviously there would have to be a hadron involved. But if they did that, then the rest, you can have excess energy over these two the rest energies of the electrons. But the excess will be converted into kinetic energy or relational energy, whereas the intrinsic energy or non-relative energy that is contained within these rest masses will be equivalent to what is left over after you get rid of the excess energy into relative energy. So these two things moving at the speed of light stop, enter orbit. I mean, they're doing this simultaneously, but they're entering orbit. That energy of, or the speed of light and the movement through space and time is now stopped. So it's no longer moving through space, no longer moving through time. These particles have stopped moving through these things. So, what's next? So, yep, and okay, and then you have the process of two photons entering confinement at a particular energy threshold, like we were just talking about. They now have rest mass based on that threshold. All excess energy is converted into kinetic energy or a relative energy that can be converted. Confined photons still translate that energy that is being below the threshold into rest mass. So anything at and below the threshold is converted into rest mass. So let's say electron is 0.511 mega electron volts. You would have to have two of them if you made a particle and antiparticle, but it would have to be at or above that in order to manifest these two. And anything above it will be converted into kinetic energy. So I know I explained that twice, but I just want to make sure people know that I understand that the mechanism is still what we observe. Everything is still what we observe. It's just a slight difference in articulation. So the meaning that we must convert the speed of light in both temporal and spatial terms, c squared, divorced from energy. So I'm just re-explaining what I explained in the mathematical portion of this. And it requires that all the symmetries of those are met as well. So a photon won't confine just with anything. It has to have the symmetries of helicity, charge, etc. It has to be able to, and that's why a hadron is necessary. And I'm going to go eventually into baryon and asymmetry and like the mechanisms by which that arose. And photon confinement gives us the ability to properly articulate how that happened. So I think that this also explains baryon asymmetry, or the decay, the outcomes of how we have matter in a different outcome than antimatter. So we still have the same amount of matter and antimatter. It's just the outcome is different for both. So most of the antimatter, I'll explain it in the video. It's going to be a really interesting video, I think. So it requires to be all symmetries of those particles, and that is the entire process of translating energy into mass. So I hope I did a good job explaining this. And that's my goal, is to get as accurate as possible. And I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And love you guys. And I'll continue to keep trying to define physics in a more, I keep saying classical, but I don't think classical is the right word. It's more of a geometric sense. So I think I'm getting more of a geometrical understanding of physics. And we're returning to, we could say classical, but it's more like a balance between, like the compromise between classical and quantum mechanics is like geometrical. So everything's geometrical, but it's between space, time, and energy. It's not all these fields and all this other stuff. Like the three fields are space, time, and energy. Everything else is just a derivative of different relationships of those three aspects. So, and I would love for somebody to show me something that can't be described by space, time, or energy, and it still be true of physical reality, and then the other way around, describe something that includes space, time, and energy as a measurement that wouldn't be true. So, but yeah, so that's it. I mean, it's short and sweet. It feels really short, but that's a good thing. It's a really simple equation, but it's very powerful. It encompasses all of relativity within it, because basically we're generating relativity by confining relativity. It's weird to think about, but it's like, okay, you had photons that had a relationship, Now, they have no space or time, so there's nothing relative to them, but they enter confinement, so they lose these aspects of space and time, which just leaves energy resting there. But these, let's say there's another one that happens, these two things now form a relationship through space and time because they are rest energy. So there's still a relationship between space, time, and energy, but it's such that it can only be relational when you have relative particles. And that's why I call tier 2 relative particles, because photons are the tier 1, and photons come together to form these particles and give rise to the relative aspects of reality. Even though you could say there's a little bit of relative that had to be the case for photons in order for them to establish a relationship, it was more of a whole. So photons that were a whole at one point, and you can say maybe it's a holographic unity, which is somebody has articulated to me, and it sounds like a good way to think of it. But then you would ask yourself, how did that unity become individual specifics that interact? So the unity of everything gave rise to the most discrete things called photons. And those photons are single twists of space, time, and energy that interact and get rid of their space and energy, or space and time, sorry, to only be rest energy when they enter confinement, even though inside of it still contains space and time and energy. It's an internal relationship now. So it has its own internal universe, so to speak, and an external. So it gives a relationship between this synthesis and the true dichotomies of the whole of the space, time, and energy. Space, time, and energy as a whole, God the Father, and the particle, God the Son. And obviously you can say that God the Son is the culmination of synthesis tiers all the way up, like I've described, but that would be getting into the metaphysical, which I want to first get people to understand this. And once you understand that, you can understand the metaphysical component, or the relationship that these things have with each other. And so we have to use our autistic brain first to understand the mathematics of it. And then we'll use our relational brain, or you could say our jock brain, to like understand the intuitive nature of how these things form a relationship. So, and then you guys will have at each other trying to figure out, how to reconcile that between you guys, because there will be people who are mathematically minded who won't understand the second version of what I said, which is syntheses and true dichotomies. But as you understand it in the formal thing that it's being measured in physical reality, then it becomes very difficult to argue against. But I'll probably eventually do another video more fully articulating the true dichotomies and syntheses, because first I need to lay out the physical, how these things manifest and how we measure them, and then the mathematical, or metaphysical, which is like the relationship that these things have with you and everything around you. But these concepts are very deep, so it's obviously very difficult. All right, so anyways, I love talking about this stuff. Okay, you guys have a good day.